We got to pour one out for Kenny Gregory. Back in 2001, Kenny Gregory set the all-time record for vertical jump at the combine, 45.5 inches. And I doubt at that time he would have thought that that record was going to stand for 20 years. That is until this week when Keon Johnson set the new record. He didn't just beat it, he obliterated it, Matt, 48 inches. So pour one out for our guy, Kenny Gregory, but that record stands no more.
I'm glad you brought up the vertical thing because I was going to ask you what you think your vertical is. I mean, you can base it off those numbers. I would imagine you don't know.
I don't have an exact measurement for you. I can barely graze the net with a running start, so I think that's a lot.
Probably at least 16.
This is Basketball Friends. He's Matt Tait. I'm Nick Schwerdt. The NBA Combine in full force in Chicago. Jalen Wilson worked out over the weekend at the G League Elite Camp. Ochai Agbaji, the only Jayhawk to get the invite to the actual NBA Combine. Measurements were really impressive, Matt, in terms of physicality, athleticism. Ochai, amongst the guards, had really impressive numbers in terms of size, in terms of speed, in terms of vertical. I believe he had the best vertical of all the guards with 41.5 inches. So impressive numbers, what he wants to see, but I still don't know exactly if we'll ever get enough information to make a determination on what exactly he's going to do, because regardless of what happens, I think you'll probably be able to have the opinion in the end that it would be a good decision to come back or a good decision to stay in the draft, depending on what your motivations are.
I mean, what does he want to get out of this? Does he just want a shot, or does he want to get drafted, or does he want to get drafted highly? I mean, all those things are unknowns. After his freshman year, Devon Dotson wanted to go. He tested. If he was in the 40 range, he was going to leave. He didn't get that assurance from anybody, so he came back. He had an All-American year, and then obviously went undrafted, and that kind of turned out wild. But, that's how guys think. They think in terms of, I want to lock myself into some sort of range, and we don't know what Ochai's is yet. But I continue to think that this is a guy who's going to take this decision all the way down to that July 7th deadline.
If I'm Jalen Wilson, I'm probably taking my time as well, because regardless of whether or not you get the invite to the combine or you're an elite prospect, you're still going to have the opportunities to get calls and to go workouts for teams. So if you're going through the process and you really want to know where you stand, you might as well get as much feedback as possible, even if you kind of feel like the writing's on the wall. For Bill Self and this coaching staff, though, you can't really wait till July 7th to start sort of preparing for what you think you're going to look like next year. And I don't mean this as a slight on Ochai at all, because if he comes back, I think he's probably one of KU's top 2 or 3 players on the team. And in terms of efficiency-wise, in terms of scoring, he might be as important as anybody. Yet it's weird to say that I'm not really sure that KU's ceiling changes all that much whether or not he stays or leaves.
Yeah, it's interesting because we've kind of seen, in my opinion anyway, we've kind of seen what the 21-22 Ochai would be back in 2019-20, right? I mean, you had a lead guard in Devon Dotson. You had an All-American big man in Udoka. And Ochai was a nice third scoring option who played off of both of those guys, got a lot of open looks and had to play quality defense and was out there 30-plus minutes a game and played well. And he fit very well into that. Well, it could be the same thing this year if he does come back. You've got Remy Martin as a lead guard, and then you got Big Dave coming off of a strong finish to last season and a preseason All Big 12 type of player and a big man who can do things down there. So Ochai would fit back into that role very easily, but does that help him? Does that help his stock?
Ochai may be the best suited to fill that role and be your knockdown shooter and be the guy who can, take 5, 6, 7 threes a game. But if it's Christian Braun who steps into that role, provided Braun didn't finish the season on a high note, but again, he will also be in a better opportunity than he was last year. Therefore, you got to think the efficiency for him would go up as well.
Yeah, and I mean, look, Jalen Coleman-Lands is another guy. He's a 40% three-point shooter, right? And he's going to play. I don't know that he's starter minutes, but I think there is a spot for him on that team. And I think there is a very big spot for him on that team if Ochai doesn't come back, because he does things that Ochai does. shoots the ball well from the outside, can play defense, and has a little bit of that veteran maturity and experience to him to be out there and be a guy you can rely on. When you look at this roster top to bottom, it does show you that there are enough pieces there to really not have to worry too much about it, right? I mean, like, let's do the starting five with Ochai. You ready for that?
Actually, you know what I would like to do instead? Give me your starting five based off the decisions you think everybody's going to make. Give me your most likely starting five for KU next year.
Okay, look, I'm only going to do this if you do this.
I'll do it as well. I will. I wouldn't ask you to do anything that I'm not going to do.
Remy Martin at the point, Joe Yesufu out there with him in that sort of perfect world that Self lives in, where you've got two attacking type point guards on the floor. I go Christian Brown at the 3, Jalen Wilson at the 4, Dave McCormick at the 5.
That's really annoying because that's the exact starting 5 that I was going to go with. But for the sake of content, I can't just give the exact same 5 that you did. So
you could, though, if you want to be right.
I don't want to be right as much as I want to be interesting. I guess I'll just predict that Ochai is going to come back, even though it's not necessarily what I believe, but there it is. So in the case that Ochai comes back, it's probably pretty similar to what it was last year. Remy Martin at the point, Christian Brown, Ochai Agbaji, Jalen Wilson, and Big Dave. I would say this, I'm not completely discounting the opportunity that Joe Yesufu could steal a starting spot from someone like Christian Brown or someone like Jalen Wilson, who did get benched in certain situations last year. I think with the way that Yesufu finished his season at Drake, where he was one of the top 10, 15 players in the country over the last month. Small sample size, but when you stack up his numbers with everybody else who was putting up impressive stat lines that time of the year, you're talking about All-American candidates. You're talking about guys who are currently preparing for the NBA draft. So I am a Joe Yesufu truther, so I'm all for trying to find ways to get him on the court as much as possible.
How about that? We're talking about 10 new faces on this team, 2 of them walk-ons. And if your holds, it's 4 returning starters on a team with 10 new faces.
You essentially took all the guys from the bench, save DeJuan Harris.
Right.
And you effectively replaced them with guys who you feel like will be more productive in those bench roles. Cam Martin, Jalen Coleman-Lands, if Joe Yesufu is that guy. You took some dudes who maybe were playing out of position or who just weren't good fits with the roster and the way you wanted to play, and you hand-selected guys who you think give you a better chance to have that right mix.
It's one of the reasons that I think that the expectations, even by Kansas standards, are so outrageously high for this team, because you've brought in all this new talent that at least on paper looks to be pretty damn good. And you're mixing it and blending it with a team that was good enough to be a 3 seed last year and win 21 games in a pandemic shortened season. So of course they should be looked at as a top 3 type of team.
Ochai measured at 4.15% body fat, which honestly, I don't even know how that is like livable. I thought you needed at least 5% body fat just to function as a normal human being, but clearly I'm not going to question the physique of a guy who's about to get potentially drafted in the NBA. So since you asked me,
do you know how cold he is when he gets into like the lake?
I know, I would always he has to layer up at all times. Like even in the summer, you're wearing a long sleeve shirt. You asked me what my vertical was. I'm going to ask you, what do you think your body fat percentage is?
What would you say if I told you I know?
Can't wait to hear it.
It is 19%, which is a lot higher than Ochai's, but I'm okay with that. You stand me next to Ochai, I don't think you'd have a hard time believing that.
So, 15% to go, and all of a sudden,
I'm a draftable NBA player.
You're on the big board.